Okay, so thanks everyone for coming. So we've got Jared, Lewis, and Philip with us today. So do you want to each briefly introduce yourselves before we go on?
Sure, yeah. I'm Jared. I've been learning Chinese for just over 2 years now, and I've been a big fan of Misha and Will's content online. I first found them on YouTube, trying to improve my language learning skills, and eventually purchased a master class, which was super helpful with my sentence mining. And recently, I did a podcast all in Chinese, and I kind of grew that confidence through a lot of the material online, learning from folks like Will and Misha.
Yeah, I'm Lewis Thomas. So I've been learning Chinese for a few years now. My wife is Chinese. We met at university, and I thought I'd make a really big effort and learn Chinese before I went to China for the first time. Met her in-laws, and they couldn't understand a word I was saying. And then I found some of Will and Misha's content in terms of why I couldn't be understood and the need for, actual language, verbal language practice. Purchased the masterclass, then did a pronunciation program, and now I'm happy to say that my mother-in-law can understand everything I'm saying.
And Philip.
Yeah, hello, I'm Philip, and I've been learning Chinese on and off for about 2 decades now, with mixed results. And last year, I made the decision to take it more serious and bring it to a level where I can have deeper conversation with native speakers. And at one event, I met Misha, and I remember that, oh, wow, that kind of like high level Chinese I heard before from that YouTuber I was just following called Will. And I was so blown away listening to Misha, like hearing him tell me that Will is his friend. That was amazing. And yeah, I mean, from my experience, obviously you can see that there's also some not so efficient ways to study Chinese, given that some people achieve a higher level in 2-3 years than me in a long time. And that's what spiked my curiosity. And yeah, I've been following the online community website, bought a master class, and now I'm also in a coaching program with Misha to improve like my pronunciation.
Perfect. And I wanted to start this discussion by talking a bit more about like why the common thread that kind of unites all of us here, which is kind of that we're all interested in improving our Chinese speaking, and that particularly like we've all had like experiences of some kind or another where we followed more traditional methods or even not so traditional methods, but we followed kind of advice that's out there of how to learn Chinese. And that advice got us to a certain level and got us to be pretty good at certain things. But the thing that it didn't get us to be good at was speaking. And so we kind of, in order to get good at speaking, we had to kind of look further and figure a lot of things out for ourselves. And that's kind of why I founded Peak Mandarin with Will, in order to kind of help people do that. And I think that's something that unites us also. I was wondering if we could share kind of our experiences of of following the advice that's out there and how that fell short when it came to trying to improve our speaking. Because it's something I've talked a lot about my own experience, but I'm wondering about you guys as well.
I mean, I had it from my wife, to be honest with you, where I'd be here, I'd be learning, I'd be learning Chinese, slaving away, learning Chinese, and then I'd say something, yes, good enough, right? It's this idea, that an actual native level of fluency is actually unattainable for foreigners, as they say, and unless maybe the key exception being if you live in China for maybe 5 to 10 years, you might be able to do it. So a big part of me is actually having the proof that this is possible, and possible even without living in China. And also the second thing that I would say is that a lot of Chinese teachers out there are obviously native Chinese, as you'd expect, and maybe sometimes they lack some of the insight that foreigners who have learned Chinese have. So that's a really key aspect for me, is that when I'm struggling with something, I can have advice from someone who's also struggled in the same way and has managed to overcome that, who's not a native speaker, who really understands where things are going wrong for me.
I think for me personally, I realized that a lot of the advice I was hearing online wouldn't really fit with my own personal language learning goals. I started learning, part of my motivation for learning Chinese was I had a wedding, not for me. My brother-in-law was getting married, in Taiwan, and so I had a trip planned about 8 months out, and I wanted to be able to be conversational in Chinese on that trip, and I just thought that would be a fun kind of goal for myself, and quickly got addicted to improving and learning Chinese. And all the advice I saw online was very focused on input, and so quickly within like a few weeks, I was just like spending multiple hours every day trying to do comprehensible input, listening to beginner videos on YouTube, and maybe understanding like 20-30% of the video, but just telling myself if I keep going, if I keep listening, eventually I'll be able to speak fluent Chinese on this trip. And maybe a few months into that, I started to try and speak with native speakers, just to kind of like test out my skills after a few months of doing that. And I had virtually no skills at all when it came to output or tones. And the advice I saw online is you just have to keep going. And the stories that I saw online is that would take maybe several years to be able to actually start speaking. And that didn't really fit my timeline. I had the wedding planned in a few months, and so I said, like, I got to go faster. And I started looking for examples online of people that had become conversational in Chinese much faster. And your content and Will's content really stood out in that regard.
And you figured that out a lot more quickly than me, because that kind of chimes with my experience where I was in kind of took advice from very immersive, heavy communities, and this idea that all you need to do is just immerse more, have more content, have more input, and eventually one day, just like magic, the language will flow out from inside of you. And kind of, in many respects, in my experience, didn't really work. And I think that's a kind of an experience that we shared to some degree. And I'm wondering about Philip, like, what was your experience with that?
Yeah, for me, it was maybe even worse, I have to admit, because part of my Chinese education was relatively structured and classical. And that means that often there was actually pretty good training in terms of pronunciation at the beginning of a semester, for example, or at some point where there was not that much other important stuff going on, and it was good for some time. But anyways, everything in a more traditional education setting when it comes to Chinese was based on written tests. So the closer you get to such a test, the more I focused, at least, on those characters and how to write them, on grammar. And so for me, actually, comprehensible input and having videos is already a huge step ahead of then just focusing on, okay, how do I master HSK 5, and this is the material I have to go through. So going through a lot of comprehensible input is already a step ahead where you all started. But then, of course, it's not sufficient, because the next step would be really like, okay, how can I then get the feedback to really improve my speaking, pronunciation, and so on and so forth?
I just wanted to come in on that, because it really hit me when you were talking about HSK there, Philip, because I too spent so much time on HSK, and it really took seeing Misha and Will's content and Peak Mandarin to really understand that HSK isn't the best route for everybody, I would say. But that's the only route out there. So I think a lot of people instantly go out there and they gravitate towards HSK. So I was at a point where, I couldn't order a coffee in a shop, but I could help someone move house. that this is the kind of bizarre stuff that HSK kind of throws at you sometimes. And that was a big part of me, was realizing, actually, I need to learn the stuff that I'm going to use every day, not what's necessarily in the HSK vocabulary.
Yeah, and so I guess like we can talk a little bit then about, like, we've spoken about ourselves a bit there in terms of our background, and I guess people want to know, like, who is this community for? And I guess the answer is it's for people who are similar to us in the respect that they've kind of been learning Chinese maybe for a while, or maybe they may even just have taken it up recently, but they have kind of reached a stumbling block where they're not sure how they should go about practicing their conversational skills and reaching a really decent conversational level, because there isn't really that much support or advice out there for people who have that particular goal. And I think, like, a decent chunk of all Mandarin learners probably do share that goal, because I think being able to speak well is kind of paradoxically the most common motivation for a lot of learners for why they want to learn Chinese, but it's also the area of learning Chinese where there's the least amount of support and advice out there. So I think that for me is like what we can kind of bring with this community, hopefully. I don't know if any of you have any thoughts to add to that.
Totally. I think, yeah, that's what really attracted me to Peak Mandarin's content is there seems like there was a focus on building conversational skills in Chinese. And that's what I really like about the community that we already have and growing with this Discord server, that we talk about what are the methods, what are the ways to become conversational in Chinese, and how to spend your time efficiently building that skill.
I'd say the other aspect of it, Jared, for me is that non-judgmental approach from people who already have a very high level of Chinese. I don't know about yourself or Philip, but I always felt that I was scared to speak to some of these people, if I'm honest with you, because I felt my Chinese was at such a poor level. I would not kind of be laughed at, to be honest with you, and really, mate, you're nowhere near our level, so go away, go and improve, and then come back maybe in a year's time. But actually, it's been such an open, welcoming community, and I'd hasten to say that I've improved more in the last few months that I've been a part of the community than I have in the years before. I can really honestly say that, and the methods are proven methods, and it's not. I would say it's not just a community for even language learning, but for general self-improvement. One thing I've learned massively is to be open to criticism, and not shy away from criticism, but in a constructive way. Obviously, I think a lot of the time, I'd have, maybe one or two people I kind of hint that my Chinese wasn't that good, and I'd go in one year out the other year, right? So it's this helpful community that's going to, support each other and give the support in that way that's not judgmental, basically.
Yeah, I think there's so many classroom environments where it's like a competition. It's like,
yeah,
you got to be number one in class.
Yeah.
Classmates, and I don't get that feeling at all in this community. People are really happy to see each other succeed and support each other, and I think everyone kind of has their own individual goals for learning Chinese, and it seems like people respect that and try and help you kind of on your own journey, figuring out how to get to the next level.
It's a really good point, because like I have noticed that in certain circles, like for some, I think there are various reasons for this, but that learning Chinese can turn into, there's this culture of it's like a competitive sport at times. So I've like been in classrooms where people just want to like prove that they're the best at Chinese by like getting the answer more quickly than other people. And like I've also like had I did a Chinese podcast on this. Like I had some really weird interactions with some higher level learners when I was at a lower level who just kind of put me down because they wanted to let me know my place, kind of thing, that I was a lower level learner and they were like they were true elites. I don't know if this comes from like the culture of like televised competitions that they have in China for like who's the best Mandarin speaker like out of all these foreigners, and they also have like this, it's a constant question like who's the best Mandarin speaker of all time. It's like completely bizarre. Like if you imagine like anyone asking that question in an English context, like who's the best English speaker of all time. Anyone ever asked that? So anyway, we want to be kind of an antidote to that while maintaining maintaining kind of the ethos that like it is possible to reach a really good level of Chinese where you can have good tones, good pronunciation. It's possible for anybody to do that, but at the same time, like it's not a competitive sport. So like it's like we want to create like and foster a supportive community rather than kind of amphitheater.
Yeah, and I think one more point I found very fascinating or interesting, that the community is definitely built around you, Misha, and Will, but there's also a lot of like input from different people of the community, and I've listened to some podcasts, I think to your podcast, Jared, and other people, and I've seen a lot of people in the community posting something online and documenting their personal story and their way to learn or to improve, and what were the maybe some bottlenecks that they encountered or some solutions that they found. And so it's also like a community where everybody or a lot of people actively participate and provide some additional thoughts on this journey. Like, how can we become as individuals, but learning from others, how can we become better communicators in terms of like spoken Chinese? And yeah, of course, not everything is helpful for everybody. Everybody has a bit of a different style, and I think that is also something that it's a community that is not just consuming content or consuming guidance, but taking it and applying it to, okay, where I am at in my language learning journey, and everybody has a bit of a different journey there, and then applying that to one's own situation and exploring a little bit together how Chinese learning or getting better in having conversations could be done.
Mm.
I definitely agree with that, Philip. I almost see the community, growing and growing. So you're going to turn into like an open source community for all of these, methods of learning Chinese. And one of the things that I've been doing is throughout my journey, my current journey, improving my pronunciation, is actually recording myself before and after, recording, how can I say, the actual small subtleties that can make a tone sound, correct or incorrect. And my vision is, like, in the future, once this, when this Discord in this Discord server, to actually share those examples where people come across similar problems. So hopefully they can shortcut the 30, 40 times that I've had to say something, and then they can just go straight to maybe only, hearing it straight away. So something that I think everybody is going to be really passionate about, doing the same thing from their perspective and sharing with others.
I think the examples is a great point. I think that's like one contrast with this community than maybe some of the other online communities that I've been a part of for learning Chinese. There's a lot of advice of like, this is the way to learn. This is the best way. You should not learn any other way. Otherwise, you're going to have all these problems. But then there's not a ton of examples of their success or kind of the skill level that they've reached. And I think that's the thing that I've seen with this community is, not everyone's perfect. We all make mistakes, but you can kind of see what is the level of folks in terms of conversational ability and how fluent are they actually with the methods that they're telling you. And I think that's been one of the really cool things, is that there are a lot of people that are very conversational in Chinese as part of this community, who share honestly what has worked for them and what hasn't, and how they've gotten to that level. And also no ego as well, which is like a rare combination, I think. People that are really good at things but don't have a huge ego about it.
Right. And I think something I want to dwell on a little bit more is like that kind of something you touched on there, Jared, which is that like this is absolutely not like a perfectionist community. It's not for people that want to like show off that they sound completely indistinguishable from a native speaker, or that necessarily have that goal. And sometimes that accusation is made whenever people talk about like a lot of the techniques that are used to get better at Chinese conversation, like, for example, tone drills and that kind of thing. And what I see as being is much more just a community of people that like refuse to accept the status quo of the kind of the generally expected standard of how good like foreigners are expected to be in Chinese, which is generally a pretty low standard. So we're not perfectionists, but we kind of we believe in like a higher standard, that like more is possible than what the traditional education system kind of expects from us, I guess.
No, I definitely agree from my own experience. It's, even being able now to speak to my mother-in-law is a huge achievement. And yeah, like, I still get tones incorrect every single sentence. There's no getting away from that, unless, for the short term that I'm improving, and maybe in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months time, I'll get to a much better standard. But for me, I just want to be able to have a conversation without people calling me cute. I want to be able to have a serious conversation with people. I think that's my first goal. So I just want to be taken seriously, and that's already happened, and I know I'll continue to improve.
Cool. And I wanted to move on to talking about like why we chose Discord specifically in terms of the platform where our community will basically be hosted. And if I could kind of start, like I guess it's because I've kind of been part of communities on other platforms, particularly like the major social media platforms, and I've found particularly in more recent times that they're just quite unsatisfying on a number of different levels. So we have like a community that I started on Facebook, the I'm Learning Mandarin community, but I just feel that Facebook doesn't really facilitate the kind of discussions that and support network that we're kind of trying to build with Discord. But I wonder if Jared, if you could start, because you're the most familiar with kind of the technical side of Discord and what it can kind of offer, what kind of features it has. And so do you have any ideas in terms of why Discord?
Yeah, I think it'll enable a couple cool things that we don't have today. So the first is that we can have a bit more organized discussions that I think will be more real time. The way I see Facebook typically working is, people kind of post and then, maybe you see it, maybe you don't, the way that the algorithms work these days, which is kind of unfortunate. If I sign up for a channel, I'm actually quite interested in that channel and I want to see that content. And sometimes you don't really see that content. So, as a result, it's really hard to have a real-time or somewhat real-time discussion on things. And Discord makes that very easy. There's channels and you can find the channel that is appropriate to the thing that you want to talk about. And you can have a almost live discussion about it. And a lot of times there is live discussion going on in these servers, and there certainly will be in our community. In addition, they also have voice channels as well in Discord. And so there'll be the opportunity to practice with other learners and to have conversation real time in voice as well. So I think that's a feature that is not available today on Facebook. So it should be hopefully a lot more dynamic, and also it can be a little bit more relevant as well, where if there's something you want to talk about, say, for example, sentence mining specifically, and maybe you want some help, or maybe you want to talk about something you've been doing recently that's been working, you can go directly to the conversation about sentence mining.
For me, it's escaping the the doom spiral of the algorithms and the other social media channels as well. I mean, I found myself sometimes going onto YouTube, starting off watching something relevant, maybe listening to something, and then 2 hours later, I'm watching a watermelon get crushed in one of those hydraulic presses. So it's like I just want to be able to go on the channel and all the content be relevant and not get distracted away from it.
Okay, so that's been awesome to kind of discuss our launch plans for this community with everyone here, and really excited about that for the future. And if anyone wants to check out the community, then what should they do, Jared?
There's a link below in the show description, and if you click that link, you'll have the option of using the web version of Discord. You can also download a client for your desktop for Windows and Mac. In addition, there's a mobile app for Android and iOS. But once you've joined by clicking that link and logged into your account, maybe you have to create an account if you don't already have one with Discord. But once you've joined, you'll be able to use it on the web or any platform of your convenience.